a really serious issue, and that is the heartbreaking increase in gun violence that we have seen in the city this year. Before we get into that topic, I want to give my regular update on the state, particularly of what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic here in Oakland, as well as share some helpful resources and a little bit of good news as well. So let's start with the update on health. The good news is that Alameda County continues to remain in the upgraded orange tier. We have moved from purple, the worst, to red, and now we are at the moderate tier, the second best tier before we get to yellow, minimal. That means that we have 4 new COVID cases per day per 100,000 residents. This is countywide. We have an adjusted case rate of 3.3 for the tier assignment. About 1.6% of people tested are testing positive, and that rate is particularly low. That is almost getting us to a new tier. And I'm also particularly proud that we are doing well in our health equity quartile positivity rate. We have a 2.6%. And many jurisdictions in our surrounding area are not meeting their health equity measurements. And I want to commend the state of California for having an equity measurement. We were certainly part of the voices that advocated for that, and we are going to continue to lift up what we are seeing so clearly during this pandemic, which is racial disparities with health outcomes. So know that some of our advocacy just recently resulted in the state discontinuing the use of the Verily testing platform. And I want to thank the members of the Oakland Racial Disparities COVID Task Force for their advocacy, and know that it impacted statewide policy right here from Oakland. Next slide. Alameda County has made several announcements allowing us to resume in a limited and safe way many of the activities that we have really missed. We are now allowed to attend wedding and funeral services up to 25% of venue capacity or 100 people, whichever is less. Same standard for attending church services. Indoor family entertainment like bowling alleys and climbing walls are allowed also at 25% capacity. So is indoor restaurant dining, just in time as the weather might be getting cooler and the rain might start. So again, these are all things that we're going back to. I know, like many parents, I'm carefully watching the directives around school reopening. Just note that while Alameda County, in fact, today announced that they will start accepting health reopening plans for middle schools and high schools, they acknowledge that it is a hard bar. Not every school is going to feel comfortable reopening under the current conditions, nor have the resources to do so safely. So please know that while the county is now accepting these plans and allowing reopening of schools, if safety plans are met, and they're very stringent, please have patience with our public school district as well as individual schools, because these are very difficult decisions to make. And it is very, very understandable that not everyone feels like it is safe to even engage in that planning work quite yet. Next slide. We opened a new COVID testing site, and Oakland is just doing a fabulous job of having these sites where you are not required to have any insurance. No questions are asked about immigration status. Children 2 and older can be tested on Saturdays, and the general hours. This is at the end of Lake Merritt at the Henry J. Kaiser parking lot. It's actually where we opened our very first testing site back in March. We've reutilized this site right next to the Oakland Museum, the Henry J. Kaiser parking lot entrance from 10th Street. Again, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. and then 12:30 to 4 p.m. To find out more, please go to covid-19.acgov.org, and that's where you can find out where all the free testing sites are in Alameda County. Next slide. This is election week. I'm excited, I'm nervous, but one of the things I'm super excited about is voting is going to be easier than it has ever been in any election. And you heard that just a couple days ago, Dave Cavell, the president of the Oakland A's, announced a wonderful plan to make the Coliseum a super voting site in Oakland. In fact, anyone in Alameda County can come vote at the Coliseum. There will be massive boxes for people who filled out their mailed ballots, but you can come vote in person in the arena in a very safe, socially distanced manner. They even are going to allow people to vote in their cars. If you have an elderly friend or relative that is worried about standing and waiting in a line or being exposed to people because of the COVID, tell them that they can vote from their cars at the Coliseum site. The hours are going to be Saturday, Sunday, and Monday from 9 to 5 p.m. So all weekends you can vote. And then, of course, on Election Day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Again, Oakland will have fewer polling places than in past years, but all polling places are going to be open Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Election Day. So be sure to vote. Even if you're not registered, you can come and register at one of these polling places on the spot and cast your ballot at the same time. So even if you miss the registration deadline, you can register at one of these polling places and cast your ballot in this historic election. And if you want to know what your mayor is recommending to vote, you can always visit my personal voting guide at libbeyforoakland.com. Next slide. Oh, this has a little bit more information about those hours I just told you about. And I failed to mention at the Coliseum, they're also going to be offering during voting COVID tests. You do have to make an appointment to get a COVID test at the Coliseum over this weekend. And then coming soon is going to be a flu shot clinic. Everyone needs to get a flu vaccine this year. I got mine. It didn't hurt at all. And the Coliseum is going to be having a big flu shot clinic where you don't even need an appointment. You can just drive up and get one. Next slide. Big news, good news this week. We got another $17 million from the state of California as part of their Project Home Key funding program. That makes our total award to Oakland almost $40 million. This is in addition to the 20 single-family homes and the college dormitory that we got an award for a couple weeks ago. This will allow us to purchase the Inn at Temescal, which will be converted to permanent affordable housing for our formerly homeless veterans, as well as the Travelers Hotel in downtown on 11th Street. That will be run by the fabulous Elaine Brown with a focus on formerly homeless residents who are also formerly incarcerated. So we're excited to welcome home Oaklanders and invite them into this safe, secure, and permanently affordable housing. Another great way that we are focused on ending homelessness in Oakland. All told, this is more than 400 permanently affordable units for our formerly homeless. We are excited, and people have already started moving in to some of these units. We're working very quickly to get people into this permanent housing. Next slide. Just a reminder, the deadline to submit your ideas for capital improvements, that's physical improvements to parks, libraries, anything in the physical space that the city owns. If you have an idea for something you'd like to see, public art, whatever it is, you can submit your ideas. The deadline is this Saturday, so just a couple more days. And you can go to the city's website, oaklandca.gov, and do a search for capital improvement program. or click on the link that my fabulous interns are posting right now on all our social media channels. Thanks. Next slide. Oh, and this year we are going to need your help more than ever for the Mayor's Toy Drive. This is a beautiful tradition that was started many, many mayors ago. Last year, we brought Christmas joy to 9,000 Oakland families who could not otherwise afford to get their children gifts for this holiday season. We know this year the need will be even greater. And so if you have any money to spare and you want to make a child's holiday dreams come true, please consider making a small donation, whatever you can afford, at oaklandca.gov/toy drive. And if you know a family that may be in need of holiday support, this year we're not going to be buying a lot of toys because of the concern about germs. We're mostly going to be giving families gift cards so they can buy their own presents. But if you know a family in need, you can have them call 510-777-TOYS, TOYS. But please be generous and give to the toy drive this year. So many kids need it. Next slide. All right. As usual, we want to hear your questions, your concerns, your thoughts. You can click on the link to put them into our thought exchange system, or you can text 351-526-859 and text the number 72855 to that number. Again, text 351-526-859 to 72855. And with that, I'm excited to tell you about tonight's program. We have had a tragic milestone happen today. Today, we passed 81 homicides in this year. 83 homicides. The 83rd homicide happened today in the city of Oakland. That was the total number of homicides that happened in 2015. We have worked as a community together to try and deliver this message and this reality that we want everyone to live and be free, that this gun violence is unacceptable. It is traumatizing our communities. It creates a crater of grief that no one can recover from. So we want to be honest about this challenge. We today, a big article in the New York Times highlighted not just Oakland, but 20 major cities that since COVID-19 struck us this year have seen an average increase in shootings and homicides of 53%. So this is something that we are seeing in cities across the country. And while we have to work around this challenge of COVID, we know that we have the tools and the knowledge to do so. I'm very pleased to feature tonight 3 of the most incredible public servants any city could ever dream of. These people have been working with their hearts, heads, and souls to reduce violence, to de-escalate tensions and conflicts in this city, to bring a sense of healing and justice to all in this city. And so I'm very pleased that tonight you're going to hear first from our Chief of Violence Prevention, Guillermo Céspedes. You will next hear from the captain in charge of our CEASEFIRE unit, the unit that focuses solely on gun violence and uses data-driven analysis to really focus in on not only the people most likely to commit the crimes, but also be victimized by the gun violence. And then finally, Reverend Demita Davis Howard, an incredible community leader, faith leader, who has been a community advocate for CEASEFIRE for more than a decade. She's been part of what we used to call OCO, we now call Faith in Action. And recently, the city actually hired her to be our full-time manager of the CEASEFIRE program. It is such an honor to work alongside each and every one of you every day. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Guillermo Cespedes, who is going to talk about the Department of Violence Prevention and the holistic, trauma-informed, and healing work that he and our violence interrupters and our life coaches are doing every day to stop this violence. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a tremendous honor to be here. I wish it was under happier circumstances, but this is what we're meant to do. We have to step up and face this challenge. And it's also an honor to be here with my colleagues, Captain Jones and Reverend Davis, both whom I have a tremendous amount of respect for their commitment to this work. If we could go to the first slide, I'm going to take a little bit of, just a little bit of time first to tell you just a couple of comments about the Department of Violence Prevention. Then the challenge from our point of view, the responses that we have made to the challenge, and some new initiatives that we are putting in place to try to mitigate the challenges that we're facing. Next slide, please. Just so for those of you who don't know, the Department of Violence Prevention was created in 2017 through a council resolution. I was hired in September of 2019. I had worked in Oakland for 20 years, then went to LA, was a deputy mayor there, then went to Central America and implemented programs in various countries, and then had the honor to come back to Oakland in September 2019. We hired our deputy chief of violence prevention in June of 2020. So that was just recently. And for those of you who know the great work of Oakland Unite, in July of this year, 2020, the Department of Violence Prevention inherited that team, their staff, and their budget. So Oakland Unite now we're collectively the Department of Violence Prevention. So as you know, the Department of Violence Prevention has become fully staffed as recent as July 2020. This next slide, please. So the results framework of the Department of Violence Prevention, by the way, it's a public health community-driven mandate. And sometimes, and it is important to hear that through this following lens, a public health approach, it is complementary to a focused deterrence approach, which is what CEASEFIRE is based on. It is not in opposition to, it is complementary to. We are one of the partners, we partner with them and they partner with us. We have a 5 results framework. Our mandate is to reduce gun violence, to reduce intimate partner violence, to reduce commercial sexual exploitation, to reduce the number of unsolved cold cases. We, of course, do not do criminal investigation on cold cases. We handle the trauma piece of the cold cases. So we work in coordination with OPD. They do the investigation and we do the trauma work. And then the last result is to reduce levels of community trauma. So as you see, the department has a broad mandate. From what I know, and I've checked, it's one of the broadest in the country. And it is the mandate, the resolution was that it used a public health, community-driven approach. So let's go to the next slide, please. The department has dual functions, and this is really important to understand. We do direct service delivery. That means we go into the field, we respond to crime scenes, we have staff that does violence interruption, we meet with families, we meet with neighbors, and we also do the typical oversight of any other department in that we oversee CBO support services, grants, and we coordinate a citywide network. Okay, so 2 functions, direct service and oversight. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is our network of partners. The Department of Violence Prevention, it's not a group of people in City Hall or in Franco Gawa Plaza. It's a network of service providers. And it includes 21 CBOs listed here, 2 system partners, OUSD and probation, and a group of community volunteers that from the inception of the program have served as our advisors. This is what community driven refers to. So these are our implementing partners, our network, the people that we listen to, and sometimes we lead and sometimes we're led by them. It is collaborative relationship with all of these service providers. Let's go to the next one, please. So here's the challenge of this moment. I am one of the folks that have been in this field for many, many, many years, over 4 decades, and this is the first time in history that violence prevention programs are called upon to do 2 things simultaneously. What I call putting out fires, and that is putting out fires that are related to gun violence, to intimate partner violence, and to COVID infection, rates of infection, simultaneously. Because what has been created, the challenge that has been created across the country is an intersection of those 3 things. Now, even if we just take spikes in gun violence and intimate partner violence, historically, those 2 forms of violence have been funded separately, have almost lived in different rooms, if you will, and certainly COVID was not in the mix. So we have 2 challenges right now that all of the country is facing, including Oakland, which is we have to put out that fire. As the mayor said, the gun violence it is impossible to even think clearly for us, and it is tremendously traumatizing for the families that are losing loved ones. So we have this mandate to put out fires and at the same time fireproof, because there's been a collective acknowledgement across the country and certainly in Oakland of underlying historical conditions that have generated generations of uneven practices in the way that we devote resources, in the way people are perceived, the institutional racism that has driven many social practices. These are long-term issues that have to be addressed. Regrettably, or perhaps we're privileged to be living through a moment in history in that we have to do both simultaneously. Our mandate is to put out the fire and to fireproof simultaneously. And that's quite a challenge for most cities. I believe Oakland has the resources, the intellectual brain power, the heart to do this. But it's quite a challenge. Violence prevention programs are not generally used to doing both. Okay, so keep that in mind. Putting out fires and fireproofing. Putting out fires is a short-term strategy, and fireproofing normally is longer term. Let's go to the next one, please. So a little bit of explanation of the challenge. We looked at 10 police beats across the city that accounted for 50% of shootings in years 2018 and 19, and 32% of intimate partner violence. These are police beats centered in East Oakland, Central Oakland, 2 in Central Oakland, and the rest in West Oakland. Not coincidentally, if we go to the next slide, these are the same police beats that show the highest rates of COVID infection. So if you look at the numbers on the right side, the rates of infection per 100,000 residents, extremely high. So it is not accidental that the same conditions over decades that have given, the underlying conditions that have given rise to the violence that we've been battling for decades are also the same conditions that have given rise to this awful pandemic that some communities are hit harder than others with. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is what we call DVP Priority Areas. And DP East Oakland, of course, Central Oakland, and two particular sections of West Oakland. Let's go to the next slide, please. And just so that you know how we came about picking these as priority areas, well, one was the issues of shootings with injuries. The other one was rates of COVID infection, and the other is population density. And these are really relevant because population density often is associated with violence, it's associated with COVID infection, it's associated with people generally having less room to maneuver, and therefore conflict more likely to emerge. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what have we done? The DVP network, the responses to gun violence have been life coaches inside DVP, at Ibasi in East Oakland, at Youth Alive, at CYO, at TMC, and at Roots, increase the frequency of virtual communications while continuing to meet in person with adult and youth life coaching participants. So from March 20 to September, 188 youth and 198 adults participants receive life coaching services under these incredibly difficult conditions. So this was done by increasing contact virtually, and while keeping social distancing practices, meeting with people in the field. And this including DVP staff and our implementing partners. We also increased the follow-up activity with individuals referred by CEASEFIRE. Just so that you all know, our connection to the CEASEFIRE strategy is that once CEASEFIRE identifies those at the highest level of activity in either being victims or either being harmed or harming other folks through shootings, those people are referred to us, and we provide intensive life coaching. So we've had to intensify this follow-up with individuals, again, under very difficult conditions because of the social distancing practices. Let's go to the next slide. The network responses to community trauma. Art Joy, Curie, Joy, UPM, Roots, Boss, they continue to offer healing-centered events and restorative circles, both virtual and when possible in person, to process trauma, build community through art, culture, and celebration of resilience and solidarity. In other words, the work of community healing did not stop. It had to shift in order to accommodate some of the contextual issues we were facing, including some of those community healing agencies became more actively involved in advocacy work. Why do we believe that's important? Advocacy these days is part of healing communities. The mobilization of communities to address social issues is part of community healing. So there were several emergency meetings with life coaching and crisis service providers, Youth Alive, CCEP, CYO. In other words, there were formal and informal meetings constantly brainstorming about how can we increase our responsiveness in the way that we serve program participants while maintaining safety, striking that balance. Next slide, please. In terms of responses to GBV, in June 2020, when we hired our deputy chief, one of the main qualifications for hiring the deputy chief for the Department of Violence Prevention was high-level expertise in gender-based violence. We're very fortunate. Her name is Dr. Sarai Crane. She's got a long history of working in the gender-based violence field in the Bay Area, extremely respected, extremely knowledgeable. And I believe this is one other member of the team that we're very proud to be collaborating with. So from April to September 2020, the Family Violence Law Center served 795 domestic violence survivors with over 2,400 crisis response hours, provided legal services to participants, and emergency housing to 58 participants in case management. Family Violence Intervention Unit responded to over 2,332 police reports. In April, 560, May, 534 in June, 404 in July, and 412 in August, and 229 in September. We still haven't compiled the data for October. And then from April to September 2020, 114 commercial sexually exploited youth were placed in emergency housing, 45 were provided with intensive outreach, and 161 participated in virtual groups, and 31 received life coaching. So the response to gender-based violence continued. As most of you know, during the first 3 months of the pandemic, there were estimates of roughly a 37% increase in intimate partner violence calls. And this again is similar to what we're seeing from our partnerships across the country. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this was a particular program when we recognized that there was an intersection of violence and COVID interruption and COVID infection. We actually approached the mayor, and through the philanthropic community, we were able to hire 16 credible messengers, organic to the priority areas of the DVP, ages 17 to 35, and we developed an approach of using PPE distribution as a way of deepening our relationships with the decision makers in those communities, the people that have the credibility and the palabra, the voice, to be able to mediate shootings. So these 17 to 35 credible messengers were deployed 3 days a week in coordination with 5 of our staff. And between May and September 2020, they gave out over 66,000 masks, 66,000 pairs of gloves, 22,000 hand sanitizers, hygiene kits, including toothbrushes and toilet paper and paste and soap and shampoo and all of that, as well as food, produce, and pre-made meals, as well as census and voting registration. Here's what we found. We went into these priority areas with 16 ambassadors, and what we hadn't anticipated was there was an entire system, lots of systems that had collapsed. So we were faced with families that needed much more than just PPE. They didn't have jobs, they didn't have food, so these ambassadors became really representative of the cities, and they will continue in this project. We've managed to stretch the budget that the mayor was able to secure for us, so they will be on our staff and continuing to do this work through December 31st. And our goal at that point is to be able to have these incredible community leaders continue with the DVP through different sources of funding. In that process, so I just want to bring that up because it was an incredibly humble investment on behalf of the city, and we have not yet been able to do a cost-benefit analysis, how much this work actually saved the city. And at some point, we will get that back to you. So in that process, we partnered with Oakland, the Police Athletic League, the cadets, the fire department, and an NGO named Tribe around food distribution, et cetera, in the San Antonio, Manzanita, and Fruitvale district, and a lot of work with connecting with the Spanish and Mon-speaking residents and day laborers. So this was a pilot, innovative approach that the mayor was willing to and really welcome having us implement. And we feel that the city has, especially the Department of Violence Prevention, has learned a tremendous amount that's going to help us in this process of putting out fires and fireproofing. If we could go to the next slide, please. So, because this is a problem that doesn't stop, almost daily we're thinking with our thought partners and implementing partners how to adapt data-driven approaches that can help us in Oakland. So one of the things that we're starting to field test is something called the triangle response. We're in the phase 1 of the adaptation of that. It's a 24/7 response protocol that has been proven effective in reducing retaliatory violence by 41% by a UCLA evaluation, and improving relationships between city government and marginalized communities based on an evaluation by Urban Policy Institute in 2012. The field test of the triangle response, I was personally involved directly. My team and I responded to over 2,500 crime scenes in LA using this triangle response. Our partners in OPD, back then, some members of CEASEFIRE, Reagan Cunningham, Deputy Chief Laurent Armstrong visited LA, shadowed the work, and so we have been working closely with them in the adaptation of this approach. We're in phase 1 of the adaptation, which includes basically the members, the leadership of the Department of Violence Prevention. It includes me, Peter Kim, Kevin Grant, Cantrell Killings, and Emilio Mena, actually going out to crime scenes and starting to look at 2 things: the activation process of how we all get activated together, and the crime scene protocols. And then the other new initiative, which is we're also very excited about, it is in the design phase. We expect implementation in January 1st. And this is a collaboration with Alameda County Probation. And what this is that we are identifying, in collaboration with probation, 15 of the families at the highest level of risk. The Department of Violence Prevention believes if you have one member of a family at a high level of risk, the entire family is at a level of risk. And that one of the things that we need to do as we rebuild and reinvigorize or return from this COVID impact is that we do have to have intentional strategies to rebuild or re-strengthen or enhance the leadership structure of families in the areas of priority areas. When I say leadership structure, it may mean a family being led by grandmother and uncle, by same-sex partners, whatever that family structure looks like. The Department of Violence Prevention is investing in re-strengthening those structures. So this is a very innovative approach in our partnership with probation. We're both very excited about moving this forward. This will not be done in isolation of law enforcement, but it is this idea that we need the partnerships with families at the table. We need to bring them into the mix as collaborators in reducing the violence that we're seeing now spreading to a younger population. So these are the new DVP initiatives that I don't know if excited is the word. We're anxious to get implemented. And we're very proud that the team is working around the clock to get it done. Let's go to the next one, please. So just in closing with this is part of what we are really driven by at the DVP, that community transformation occurs. One of the ways that it occurs is when individuals have families that are safe, healthy, and empowered. And we define families as an essential building block of community and a vehicle for support, healing, and recovery. And in that process, We look at family traditions and customs and rituals that generate pride, resiliency, and cohesion as part of the medicine or the intervention. So we are helping families to go back and reclaim some of those traditions that have been severed by either immigration, by structural racism, by pathologizing of families. We believe very firmly that the Oakland families that we know, that we hear about from communities, are up to the task of providing mutual protection for all of its members, and our job is to help and collaborate with them in doing that. So we're recruiting a new partnership, a new way of approaching. This is based on data. These are approaches that all have been validated in other places, and all we're doing with the DVP is contextualizing, meeting with the leadership, the experts in Oakland, and helping to take these strategies and adapt them to a new context. As most of you know, I've worked all over the world, and I know that you just can't parachute a new model from somewhere else and just implement it. That process of contextualization takes incredible thought, partnership, and it's a very meticulous process. So we're very proud to be involved in that. All of this is good news of what we're doing. And however, I don't want to minimize the fact that the underlying conditions that have generated violence for years are now generating high rates of COVID infection, unemployment, and other things. And we have a task. We have to fireproof, meaning immediately do whatever is necessary to put out the fire of shootings. And at the same time, we have to address these longer term issues that have been plaguing our communities for generations. So I would like to close with the following. This was my grandmother's favorite advice to me. And to those of you out in the streets, do not give the oppressor the tools to oppress you with. Just do not. We're in a moment of time that we have to make sure we are not helping the oppressor oppress us. So please take that to heart. And I beg you on behalf of the communities and the department that I represent that we need to figure out ways to put out the fire. And you can participate in that. But just stop shooting.
Thank you, Chief. That is beautiful and powerful. Don't let the oppressor have the tools of oppression. Thank you. Very, very thoughtful.
Thank you, Madam.
We in Oakland believe in holistic safety. We believe in investing first and foremost in creating conditions of safety. But we unfortunately have not gotten to a state yet where enforcement and punishment is not part of our equation. The CEASEFIRE strategy is something that the city of Oakland earned national headlines last year for achieving an unprecedented 50% reduction in gun violence, shootings, and homicides in only 5 years. It's one of the most dramatic and sustained violence reductions that any city has seen. And in that strategy, it does include an enforcement strategy that is led by the police department in a very strategic, data-driven manner. Prioritizing the most violent crime within our police department is part of what has always been our priority and our value. Enforcement is the last resort, but it is part of the carrot and stick approach that many use to describe CEASEFIRE, which really is, there is no violence reduction strategy that is more evidence-based or proven that it is replicatable in other cities than CEASEFIRE. The head of the CEASEFIRE unit in the Oakland Police Department is Captain Tony Jones. Captain Jones is an Oakland native, born and raised, another Oakland Public School graduate, and Captain Jones takes his charge very seriously and with great thoughtfulness. So Captain Jones, it's a pleasure to have you talk tonight about what Oakland is experiencing and the different strategies that you're going to be using, both strategies that have been part of our ceasefire approach, but how we are having to adapt them because so many of our strategies are not possible because of the health orders under COVID. So Captain Jones, thank you for joining us tonight to share a little bit about the ceasefire enforcement strategy and how the Oakland Police Department is working so hard every day to stop the heartbreak in Oakland.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me, Mayor Schaaf. And hello, everyone. She said I'm Captain Tony Jones. I lead our ceasefire division. And I am an Oakland boy. I still live here. I've been here my entire life. Everyone in my family still lives in Oakland. So I'm invested here. I have a horse in the race. And my community is really struggling right now, not just with the pandemic and the COVID, but as the mayor highlighted in her open remarks, it's really struggling to keep a lid on the gun violence. You know, one of the things that made Oakland stand out, above all the other cities in the United States is over the last 5 or 6 years when crime spikes were happening in Ferguson, when they were having protests in Baltimore, in all of the major cities. In Oakland, we always found a way, the police working with the community, working with what's now DVP, but Oakland United at the time, found a way to keep a lid on our gun violence and made ourselves a national model where police departments all across this country wanted to come to Oakland and figure out exactly what we were doing so they could take it back to their cities and do it as well. Unfortunately, once the pandemic hit, these are uncharted waters for us right here. And we've been trying to be creative and think outside of the box and come up with ways or ideas or strategies that could help us keep a lid on the gun violence while we also try to, help the community navigate the pandemic. But some people on the line may not know the history of ceasefire, just what it is. So if you could put the first slide up, I'll just go over that really quickly and then get into more detail about exactly what we're doing to try to combat the gun violence in the city and what we're trying to do to steer more individuals towards Chief Cespediz's crew, towards the services, because as the mayor said, one of our goals is to reduce recidivism. So we definitely don't want to see a jail full of people. We much rather people listen to our message and take Chief Cespediz up, on his offer of services as well as our community-based partners. So as the mayor said, the ceasefire is a operational strategy. It's not a program within one part of the police department. It's an operational philosophy that we have at OPD, where we're committed to using crime data, criminal intelligence, information from the community, a heavy emphasis on data to focus on individuals who are prone to violence, either being the person shooting or even the person that's likely to get shot. And when we started doing this work back in 2012, we policed a lot differently back then because we didn't really use data. When we had a crime spike in a particular neighborhood, we would just flood the area with a ton of police officers. The police officers would be stopping everybody, and inevitably it would be in areas that are majority minority. And instead of actually being effective in reducing violence, we found ourselves alienating the same community that we were trying to protect from violence because that tactic and that strategy was just so poor. And when I talk to community members now, and I just think every time I think about it, I just think about how ridiculous that tactic was that we used to use when we thought that we were doing the right thing and thought we were being effective at reducing violence. But it was a terrible strategy that just made relationship building extremely complicated for areas that are most impacted by violence. Even if we reduce crime, to not 80, 90%, If the people in the neighborhood hate you because of the way that you police the area, then you really haven't achieved anything. And so with the ceasefire strategy, what we call precision-based policing, that's where you're really focusing on those precise individuals that are causing the violence. We did a problem analysis on our gun violence in Oakland, and what we learned is that there's less than 1% of our population here that's causing that's really active and really causing the violence. Like maybe not even 400 people. And what we also learned is that a biggest chunk of our violence, gun violence, is coming from gangs or groups and their associates. And so when we began focusing solely on those individuals in the gangs and the groups, and we had a culture change in how we policed the gangs or groups, where we partnered with our outside law enforcement partners, and we just really honed in on those specific people that were shooting other people. That's when we began start seeing results. If you can move to the next slide. And again, with our goals being to reduce gang and group shootings, to reduce recidivism rates among people who we interact with, and we also sought to build relationships with the individuals who are involved in the violence, their families, as well as people who have been traumatized by police action in some of our most crime-ridden neighborhoods. We want to build relationships and build trust with those people too. And by having the data and understanding where we needed to focus our resources on, it made these things, these goals, achievable. And if you could go to the next slide. And so enforcement is just one part of it. And again, as a philosophy, we'd rather not have to do enforcement activities on people in our city. Like, we really do not want to do that. So there's two things that we do. We engage in direct communication with people who we know are involved in gun violence through two methods. The first one, the one that gets the most publicity, is the group call-in. This is where we call in individuals who we know are involved in active conflicts. We know through investigations, through partners, through people from the street, through community members, that certain individuals are actively trying to shoot each other. So we'll call them into a large group setting of about, the most I think we've had is 18 or 20 people. And then law enforcement will be present. And then there'll also be a heavy community present led by DVP staff. And we develop a message that's customized to the issues that are plaguing the people who attend the meeting. So the police will speak, the district attorney will speak, the FBI will speak, and we will tell them that we know exactly what conflicts they have, who they're having problems with, and if they continue that and continue to pick up guns, continue to be involved in gun violence, then they can expect that law enforcement will partner together and come after them with the support of the community, because we're giving them an opportunity in that moment to steer away from the gang and take the hand of Chief Cespedes' staff and do something different. And I always say, because I talk at these call-ins to people, that we understand if you've been in a situation for a long time, and sometimes it's not even their own doing. Some people could grow up and have challenging childhoods. We understand that the change is not going to happen overnight. Like, it would be ridiculous for us to think that. And that at the police department, that we do have patience. And if you are trying and you're working with our partners at DVP or CYO or any other community-based organizations that we work with, then the police department will be patient with you. And we'll have some grace, if a person, makes a mistakes and find themselves in a situation where, we have the ability to give them a pass, in a sense. If somebody's really trying and they're making strides, the last thing we want to do is yank the rug under Chief Cespedes' staff, who've probably done a lot of work, a lot of meetings, and send the person to jail for something really, trivial or something relatively minor. And so that's how the call-in works. We deliver the message and we leave. And then Chief Cespedes staff, reinforces the message, and they try to persuade the individuals to take their hand, to come and take them up on some of the services, whether it's job training, tattoo removal, finishing, educational options. A array of services are available. One of the things challenges that we've always faced is finding more partners in the community to have more options for Chief Cespedes' staff to present. Example, if there's a person who owns a construction company or carpenters or a auto body shop, people who can come to those meetings and offer, training or jobs as alternatives to what, DVP already has, those are the things that we have consistently been looking for to try to bolster the options or services that we can offer the young men and women who attend the call-ins. What we also do is what we call a custom notification. This is a one-on-one conversation with somebody who's actively involved in shootings. And when the very first one I did, I was like, this can't work. Like, I'm going to sit down with somebody and talk to them about, hey, I know you're shooting at this guy, so you better change or, we're going to get you. But when I listened to our partners at California Partnership and the way they explained it, and we started doing them, and we started seeing results, we start seeing that, if you have a conversation with someone and that conversation you have with them could make them reevaluate what they're doing, and during that reevaluation period, which could be 2 months, 2 weeks, that's 2 weeks or 2 months that they're not in the streets shooting. And in Oakland, we'll take that. I'll talk to somebody for 30 minutes, for an hour, if that'll buy me in the city 2 weeks or 2 months of that person not being involved in criminal activity, particularly gun violence. And what since Reverend Demita's been on, what we've really been doing is what we call group interventions, where you bring key members from a gang or a group to a meeting, and it's a modified version of the call-in. Same process, but instead of having a larger group, it's specific members of the group that we message, and then our community partners come in and again try to steer them away from the criminal activity. Next slide, please. And as you can see, when we started doing CEASEFIRE in 2012, we were having 125 homicides, 553 people were getting shot. And if you go back even before this, because I worked in our homicide division as a detective for about 10 years, and I remember the years we would have 130 or 140, or when I was a beat cop, we'd have 160 homicides. And so if you look at 2012 and to where we ended up in 2019, we have, 50% less people getting shot in our city. And, we talk about the homicides, but when I'm talking with our staff and community people, the shootings is the real indicator of how active or how violent, the city is at a given moment. And we've been able to go from 553 shootings to 284, 125 murders to 74. That's a lot of people who have not been harmed because of the strategy, because of the partnerships with probation, with Cheryl Merchant, Melvin Wynn, with Scott Blake, David Muhammad at CYO, and Reverend Demita, and especially Kevin Grant over at DVP, who's really like a gift to our city, who's connected in the city, and he gets it. Like, Kevin understands what we're trying to do, and I understand the position that DVP is in, and so the relationship that we have with all of the people that are involved with this has really helped us. OPD didn't get from 125 homicides to 74 on our own. Without the people I just discussed, this would not have been possible. And even to the mayor, with the support you've given us over the years, you made it possible for OPD to achieve this with our partners. You were the glue that made everybody stick together when there was, disagreements and everything. but we got it done. And so what's happened, though, because of the pandemic, is we've been struggling. Just to be blunt about it, the police department has been struggling, and we've haven't found a way yet. You know what I mean? Yet is the key word, to really get a lid on the group and gang violence. We've experienced some challenges. We don't have an issue at OPD with people coming home early from jail because of COVID. Like, that's one of the things that we started off, that we want. We want people out of jail, after they, did their time, to come to the community and be better and do better and be part of the solution. There are so many people that have turned their lives around, that we've messaged, who've come back to our meetings and spoke to young people and told them that they can turn their life around. And so we haven't been able to do the custom notifications, the direct communications, and the call-ins like we would like to because of the COVID, right? That's what the situation was. However, we recognize that we have to do something different, and Reverend Demita's already started that. Whether it's having a microphone, putting everybody 10 feet away from each other, finding a place to get it done, because we have to do it. Direct communication with people who are involved in violence works. And we've had some challenges internally. We've had people get infected with COVID. It creates we have to shut everything down, decontamination, but we have to overcome all of that at OPD and find a way to get back on track with our direct communication, with steering people to Chief Cespedes' staff, and getting that part of our ship righted so that we can be more effective in our messaging and have that part of it operating at full capacity to give, to deter, people from being involved in their violence if they know that we're focusing on them, because we just haven't been able to deliver that message like we used to. And like Chief Cespedes said, we had a terrible double homicide a couple of weeks ago on 84th Avenue. And it was the scene, I was out there, it was terrible. DVP came out, and everything changed when his staff got there and they started talking to the people and they started helping them with the process at that moment. It's just something different when his staff says the exact same thing to a grieving family than when a police officer in a uniform says it. It's just different. And it was really helpful to have his staff there, and the fact that they're going to be coming to the scenes, interacting with the families, and begin that healing process, helping them with the grieving, helping them with the trauma, directly at the scene is going to be a huge boost to just the entire, the entire struggle that we're having around gun violence at this time. And internally in OPD, relative to the enforcement, there's some things that we can do differently as far as how we deploy. We're kind of stuck in silos. We operate by areas. We've fixed that, and we're being more flexible and trying to be in more places at one time. But we're not giving up on this strategy. It's proven to work, and we just have to keep fighting. And everybody that's on this meeting, I give you my word that there's nobody in OPD that is quitting. We're not just waving a white flag and saying, well, it's COVID, so that's a built-in excuse for us. No, we want to still be the city that, while crime is going up everywhere else, we want people to look at Oakland and say, how did they do it? So I'm going to keep working with Chief Cespedes, his staff. You're going to hear from Reverend Demita in a moment here, and I'll be around to answer any questions if you have some. But we're going to figure out a way to get the gun violence in this city back under control. And that's what I have for you now, and I'll be around to answer any questions.
Captain, thank you so much. And I love how you say you're not quitting, you're not using it as an excuse. And I want to recognize that the CEASEFIRE unit actually had to be completely shut down because officers were infected with COVID. And you all have been working out in the community through this entire pandemic, taking a lot of risks. So thank you so much for your service. I think it's worth mentioning another part of the Oakland story. When evaluators came in last year and really documented with a very rigorous academic evaluation that CEASEFIRE was driving this marked decrease in crime. And while I want to commend the police, the Department of Violence Prevention, our faith leaders, the community leaders, let us recognize, and these are mostly young men or men themselves, that they have made a choice. They have made a choice to not engage in violence. And it's worth mentioning that during those same years that we've seen that reduction in gun violence in Oakland, OPD reduced the number of arrests that they have made, reduced arrests by 60%. So when we say we know we cannot arrest our way out of the problem, we have proof of that. We have brought down violence. At the same time, we have brought down arrests, and that is through very targeted and data-based interventions. So again, thank you, Captain Jones, for all the hard work that you do and you are continuing to do. Last and definitely not least at all, we want to talk about how you can be part of bringing peace and healing to our streets, how your engagement, your voice can also send this clear message that we want everyone to live and be free. And there is no one better to tell you about how to engage and the power and effect of that community engagement than Reverend Demita. Reverend Demita has been out as a community partner to CEASEFIRE for as long as I can remember, long before I was mayor. I remember you, Reverend Demita, in those big actions that OCO organized when you all took community leaders to Boston to actually study this intervention at a time when Oakland wasn't even thinking about using this as a strategy. And so, Reverend Demita, it is such an honor that you have chosen to come work for the city of Oakland and actually make this your day job, because it's always been your passion, your commitment. So it is a great pleasure to introduce the manager of the CEASEFIRE program, Reverend Demita.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everybody else. So, first of all, being third in the lineup behind Chief Cespedes and Captain Jones put me in a peculiar situation, because a lot of things I would have said, they've already said, and I don't want to duplicate it. So I think I'm going to take a whole different approach. As the mayor said, I want to talk about who we are as citizens and advocates for our city, and not just for our city, but for our communities and for each and every life that lives in our communities. I like to remind folks that this work is about bringing services and paying attention to a part of society that had been thrown away for many years. And those are those who might be labeled or who are labeled as either shooters or victims of shooters. They had not gotten the kind of attention for years that CEASEFIRE now is trying to do, to interrupt the trajectory of a life that is most times not conditions that they would have willingly lived into or grown into. So I just want to point out a couple of things about what the community has done for CEASEFIRE and what you as the community can do. Can you cue my slides? They are all, I don't want to use any of them except for a couple now. Go next slide. This is the slide I wanted to talk about. This slide is talking about what CEASEFIRE is, but I want everybody here in the city of Oakland to know that it was a community-based organization led by and charged by a mother whose son was shot and killed on his birthday. That something had to be done about the high number of homicides by gun violence in the city. This strategy and the advocacy to get a strategy here in this city to curb the violence, what was long needed and took a while to get. 3 mayors, I can't tell you how many police chiefs, but it was started by the leadership in Oakland community organizations. They demanded that something be done, some strategy be brought to this city. And then, as the mayor said, they actually went out and did research across the country and studied what had been called the Boston Miracle in 1996, where they reduced homicides by gun by 60%. And then they met with folks at High Point, North Carolina, who at the time was implementing the strategy, and they demanded, by bringing around 2,500 citizens to then Mayor Ron Dellums and telling him something needed to be done to reduce the number of gun violence homicides here in the city of Oakland. Next slide. So again, we all know this is about data. This is not something somebody dreamt of or somebody's theory. This is based in data. And that's why OCO, which is now called Faith in Action East Bay, thought this would be the strategy that would work, because they were able to see numbers. They were able to see information. They were able to determine who was committing the violence. And the theory is that you have direct, respectful communication with those individuals, you can change the trajectory of their life. Now I want you to go all the way to the last slide, please. Number 14. This is a partnership, but more important, this was the important thing. If Barbara and others who have been personally experiencing the kind of trauma that comes to communities when loved ones are killed by gun violence, had not got involved, had not insisted that something be done, we may still be at a level that is a lot higher than what it is today. Before CEASEFIRE came to Oakland, over a 40-year period, we're not talking about a couple of years, the average number of homicides, if you looked at 40 years worth of data, was about 109 homicides a year. That's too many homicides. So I wanted to let you all know today that when the situation is as grave as it was, that you can get involved. And although right now we have a spike in violence, as Captain Jones says, we're not throwing in the towel. If you want to get involved, come out with community members who walk the very communities that have been traumatized by violence with a message that we love our community. We love each and every individual in our community, those who might be shooters and those who might be victims of shooters. But more importantly, we demand that the gun violence stop, because our communities deserve safety also, and they deserve to thrive, and we have to stop the gun violence in those communities. So real quickly, because I know we're running over, I didn't go through my whole slide deck. I changed my message a lot, but I just want you to know that you can get involved. This is passion work. When I was 27, I lost my 19-year-old brother to gun violence. I have lost a god brother to gun violence. I lost a niece in West Oakland who was on her way to a party and a stray bullet took her out. This is the work that matters to families and helps our communities heal. This is the work that I ask each and every one of you to get involved and do something about. So there's contact information, Terry McWilliams, that actually should be ran all together. The next night walk will be November 13th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. They'll be gathering at 98th and International, and they'll be walking the community, delivering the message that we love our community, we love each and every individual in our community, and that we want the gun violence to stop. So if you have any other questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the program. But I just want you to know that Oakland has been lifted up as a city who knows what they're doing about this. Just 2 weeks ago, folks from Indianapolis, community groups from all over the country have been calling and tapping into OCO to see how and what they did to build a partnership, a real partnership in the city of Oakland, in order to reduce the the amount of gun violence that we have been known for years to be, very murder cities, and we reduced it dramatically by 50%. So it's not just locally, it's all over the country, and actually in some cases a couple of international cities. So get involved. You can make a difference. If you don't make a difference, if you don't speak up, then nothing changes. We have to do our part as individuals. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Reverend Demita. I'm so sorry for your personal losses. I know this work means so much to you personally. Clearly, it really, and I know that grief never ever goes away. This is the part where we open it up to your questions, to your comments. Again, I invite you to click on the link for Thought Exchange, text 351-526-859. Text that to 72855. And while we wait for your questions, your thoughts, again, you can just post a comment if you want to come in. I did receive 4 questions ahead of the presentation that are not specific to ceasefire or the recent uptick in violence, but we always promise to answer whatever you ask. This is supposed to be an interactive forum with your mayor. So the question is, why hasn't the city done anything to keep Oakland clean from debris, trash, and illegal dumping near homeless camps? So these are 4 questions. They're all very related. It says, the debris is an eyesore. It brings down the value in neighborhoods. Why do we have to live with trash everywhere? Clean Oakland now. The second question that's quite related. Now that Oakland has created 400 new units of housing, when will the homeless camps be closed? The homeless camps create blight, which in turn makes neighborhoods unsafe. Let me start with that. I mean, Oakland, at our last point in time count, we counted 3,200 individuals who are unsheltered. 3,200. And so while 400 units of permanently affordable housing for our formerly homeless neighbors is a really great accomplishment, it is not going to solve this problem overnight. I am really thankful that the Oakland City Council unanimously passed an encampment management policy. Now that policy makes it clear that we do not ever criminalize poverty or homelessness. We do not cite or arrest the homeless, but we do have standards of safety and health that are in the interest of both the unsheltered and their surrounding neighbors. And part of that also has to do with ensuring that that we also try and create some clear expectations for our unsheltered residents about where they can most safely reside, and our attempts to try and support them with health and hygiene. I am pleased to say there are a couple things that you can expect to improve the cleanliness of the city. One, this new policy, because at the beginning of the year, the city council passed a policy to stop moving or in any way disrupting encampments, and now we have a policy and a process to support and in many cases offer shelter to our encamped residents. Also, starting in December, we will have a whole additional illegal dumping crew. All it will do will be to pick up illegal dumping. The other thing that may be good news to you or bad news to you, in the middle of November, we will resume ticketing cars that do not move on street sweeping days. Now, we will give everyone their first time, it will be a warning, but the second time will be a ticket. When cars are parked on street sweeping days, we are not able to actually clean the trash off of the streets with our machines. That will be resuming in mid-November. So these are 2 things that hopefully are going to improve the cleanliness. COVID has impacted our ability to send our workers out, and we are excited that these new resources are going to be coming to bear soon. The other questions, again, have to do with trash on the street, a presumed association between crime levels and the environment, and again, concerns about illegal dumping. If you have any illegal dumping or you want to report illegal dumping that you want the city to come pick up, you can call 311 from anywhere in Oakland, 311. You can download the Oak 311 app, or you can email oak311@oaklandca.gov. And if you could put our wonderful interns, if you could put those resources in the chat, you are our eyes and ears in the community, and you reporting illegal dumping allows us to respond to it more quickly. With that, I understand we have some questions from our audience for our phenomenal guests tonight. If you could please put up the thought exchange. I think this first question is probably for you, Captain Jones. Why isn't OPD enforcing smaller laws that could decrease violence? Traffic infractions indicate all laws are to be followed, not just some laws. People are emboldened to commit crime because they aren't penalized for small crime, like reckless driving. Fines are proven to decrease this. Can you talk about enforcement priorities as well as the data around kind of zero tolerance?
Yeah, so we do. First of all, I want to say I share the concerns. I know when I drive to work every morning, the traffic, the way that people are driving now, is definitely a huge problem. So I share in that complaint as well. But there's a balance that we have to meet at the police department. So that theory of law enforcement is kind of similar to broken windows, where police departments come in and they enforce, small infractions in areas where high crime is at. And what inevitably ends up happening is the police end up ticketing and enforcing laws disproportionately, in the communities of color. And we don't want to do that. We do enforce traffic laws. We have a traffic division. We have, so we recognize it's a problem. And when I used to be the area commander for Area 5, that was the biggest complaint that I would get. And so we have, when you see officers on motorcycles, that's exactly what their job is. But we want to commit most of our resources here on serious things. Serious things where people lives are in danger, or where their homes are at risk of getting burglarized. Things where we don't want people to get hurt. We do enforce minor laws, but again, we have to be careful and find that balance of enforcing those small things, because that broken windows concept of policing it's something that we absolutely do not want to do in here in Oakland. There's been a ton of research on it that proves that it does more harm to community policing than it actually helps. So
thank you, Captain Jones. And I just want to clarify, I think there are two different things that people think of when they talk about broken windows. Obviously, we do care about the CEPTED ideas that environmental factors can either support safety or not, and we certainly don't want to have broken windows in the city. Sure. But the idea of actually kind of harassing, when you look at what happened in Ferguson with the over ticketing of people and how that caused so much anger and resentment and just a breaking of community trust, that is what has been proven to actually make communities less safe. The second question is one I already read because we got it ahead of time. The next question is for Chief Cespedes. Chief Cespedes, and just so you all know, we have 14 questions, so I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as possible because we only have about 8 minutes left. Chief Cespedes, in the Department of Violence Prevention, how are you addressing the issue of domestic violence and its intersection with trafficking, engaging community advocates? Violence against women and girls and the family is considered the shadow pandemic exacerbated by sheltered households.
I fully agree with that question, and I think the first step was to talk about resources. How we distribute resources. Historically, gun violence or violence associated with gangs has been the main focus of violence prevention, and violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, violence that takes place inside the family has been secondary. So prior to the pandemic, the idea of the Department of Violence Prevention was to bring in someone that has the same level of expertise that I have in gang-related violence, but in the field of gender-based violence. So Dr. Sarai Crane, who I believe is on the line, has been leading that effort, advocating not just at the funding level, but advocating for training throughout the city to identify, because gender-based violence is severely underreported. So when we say that it's been a 37% increase, the fact is that it's probably higher. So the first step that we took was make it a priority, a resource priority. Second step, to bring in expertise that can rally other experts throughout the Bay Area to help the Department of Violence Prevention to do this. And I don't know if we have time, Mayor, but basically for more in-depth discussion on gender-based violence and specifically the overlap between domestic violence and trafficking, we welcome community groups to sit down with Dr. Crane and really take this apart. What I do want to say is the following. We're extremely proud that Oakland has put all of this in one department and has challenged us to come up with an integrated strategy that gives equal attention to both. And so I rarely speak in public about the department without being accompanied by my partner in this work, Dr. Crane, because we think this is, the pandemic only exposed what we have known for a long time. Intimate partner violence, sometimes it is the cause of gang-related violence, and sometimes it is the result of, but they're very linked. And there are women gang experts throughout the country that don't see a difference between the two. The gang violence.
Thank you, and I know Dr. Crane is such an amazing resource for us. And please, I don't know if the interns can post her email address, but you can Google her and get in touch with her, and maybe that will be a good topic for a future town hall for us. Captain Jones, I think this is for you, and Reverend Demita, you might want to chime in as well. If you've identified the most violent individuals, why haven't you put a net over them? Why wait for them to do harm before we try to figure out who has caused the problem?
So I'll start at it first. So we do, you know what I mean? We kind of do, we take a two-pronged approach, right? We want to give them an opportunity to do something different. And if they don't, then we put, you know, what you would call the net on them, and we use our partners, and we use whatever we can do to remove them from the community. But our first priority is to try and engage with them, to try to, you know, help them find a different path, and to get them to stop shooting on their own, and get them to essentially drop out of the gang life and partner up with DVP and start being productive rather than, you know, spending an enormous amount of police resources to remove them from the community. So
right. I'd just like to reiterate what was said earlier, and that is that for many decades we have been trying to arrest ourselves out of this problem, and that has not worked. So that's why I kind of figure throwing the net over. We want to embrace them in a different way. We want to have respectful, direct communications with these young men to try to change the trajectory of their life, so that in the future they are a thriving member of our society and our communities. All Black lives matter, including those who may have gotten caught up in a situation where they're on one side of the gun, either at the trigger side or either at the side of receiving a bullet. So we're doing everything we can to keep them out of jail or incarcerated.
And also, this is all about like intervening before the crime happens. We've seen time and time again retaliation. So this is about actually stopping someone from becoming a violent individual because of their emotions around other violent acts. That's what we're trying to interrupt, is that cycle. I answered questions about dumping and the link between cleanliness. There's a great question. Where are our younger Oakland youth on this panel? We need a representative voice. Well, that's a perfectly good point. I think we all admit we are all OGs on this panel. We will, I think we are overdue for a youth town hall, which we did have a couple months ago, completely planned and run by youth, for youth. We will bring that back soon. Thank you for the suggestion. How much is Oakland spending on this effort? Would we be better off gifting the operating budget into the community? Fair question. I don't know if any of you want to take that one on. I guess since you're all quiet, I will say this. I am a huge believer in unconditional cash. I am a founding member of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. We will soon be announcing a pilot in Oakland. I believe that should be a federal policy. the best way to interrupt income and racial disparities is literally by giving people money. And that's something that I feel very passionate about. And so we are thinking about gifting. It's not just gifting money, but trying to even the playing field. And I believe at the end of the day, that actually will be cost efficient for government. I don't know if any of you want to put any words into about the cost benefit of our investments. All right, lack of youth activities due to COVID. With COVID cancellation of schools and clubs, sports, recreation, and youth centers, youth can't occupy themselves nor burn off energy and anger. I don't know if any of you want to talk about our just collective grief over the 6 young lives lost this year. Aaron Pryor, who is written about in today's New York Times, a fellow Skyline Titan who had just an amazing, promising career as a football player. But COVID, absolutely, this is part of this pandemic and claiming lives. I don't know if any of you want to add to this very, very good point that has been raised.
So I think that DVP is doing some work with probation to address that. But I do want to say that COVID has given us conditions that kind of has set us back, but it is in no way stopping this city from repeatedly trying to reach out to those folks who need it most in order to stop the gun violence. So it is a condition, but it is not something that is keeping us down. Chief Cespedes, my apologies for interrupting.
No. Great words, Reverend. What I wanted to comment on is that, yes, we have to reignite youth development activities, not just for those at the highest level of risk, but for the Aaron Pryors of the world. So to that end, we have been meeting very intensely with other departments, other city departments, including Rec and Parks, Human Services, Oakland Fund for Children and Youth, exactly to figure out how can we get those programs started while those of us are focused on that highest level of risk population. We do need just youth development activities to keep youth occupied in a safe way. So there are specific strategies that will be rolled out as interdepartmental approaches that include youth development activities. So what Reverend Davis was talking about in our collaboration with probation is those youth at the highest level of risk, but we still need work to close off the entryway to more problematic behavior, and that generally gets done by good youth development activities.
Without question. I know that our time is up tonight. I'm sorry that we didn't get to every question. Thank you, Reverend Demita, Chief Cespedes, for those closing thoughts. Captain Jones, do you want to close us out with any closing thoughts for our audience?
No, it's just really good to come and talk about CEASEFIRE, just talk about what we're doing. And, just thrilled to be here. Glad you invited me. And I listen to your town halls all the time, but it's good to finally be a guest. So.
Listen, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for caring about your city and being in conversation with us tonight. We are going to be back in 1 week. This was a unique month where we had 5 Thursdays. We're going to go back to our first and third Thursday routine this coming month, which means we will see you in 1 week. By then, we will have had Election Day. Please go out, lift your voice, your values, and vote. We will be back 1 week from today with a very exciting town hall that will also be around the future of our police department and public safety in Oakland. Everyone be safe. Please take care of one another, and we will see you.